Hi folks, I'm Andy Hobbs. I'm from Eden Mods. I'm the designer of the Rose and the Snapdragon, and the Snapdragon 1.5 is what I'm going to talk about right now. Um, Basically, what I'm going to do is a little breakdown video for you, so you can understand it a bit more fully. It's quite a lot different from the version 1, so I thought it'd be helpful for you guys. So if you do take it apart and want to put it back together again, you've just not got a sea of parts that you've got to try and figure out how to go together. Um, I'll just explain it all out, talk to you about some of the features that we've added into the 1.5 that weren't in the 1, and then we'll put it back together again, and then that's pretty much the whole point of the video, really. So should we go down to the table and see what's what? Right then, there's only two tools you're going to need to be able to disassemble the Snapdragon in its entirety, and that will be a 1.5mm Allen key and a flat-bladed screwdriver. So without further ado, let's start taking it apart. What I will do as I'm doing this is I'll just point out the similarities and the differences as I'm going. So there's your top cap. That is basically, oh crikey, let's try and get in view. There we go. That's basically exactly the same in every detail as the Snapdragon V1. So as a result, all the accessories that we've got currently for the Snapdragon V1 also fit the V1.5. So the snappy cap and the cloud cap. In fact, I'll even show you. I've got a cloud cap right there. Perfect, no problem at all. Okay, so right, deck wise, let's see if I can get it in here so you don't have the glare, but essentially looks the same, business as usual. Doesn't look a lot different at all in there, and that is intentional. I didn't want to change the vape's still the same. So the business end is down under here. Now straight away, if you've got a V1, you'll realise that there's two screws there, and they weren't there on the V1 because we had a reverse threaded base. People didn't like the reverse threaded base. When we done the Rose, we did it forward threaded. They didn't like that either. So this is the next option. We're going to go to we're using these screws to hold the whole thing on, rather than having it threaded. So we'll start to undo that. I'm trying to do this all so that you can see. So it's actually quite difficult to do. So you'll have to bear with me. I'm a bit of a noob at this sort of thing, so I'll try and talk my way through it without sounding like an idiot, but most of the time I just sound like an idiot anyway. The wife will attest to that. So right, so the screws are out, and then all you do is just pop that off. It's not screwed on, it's not threaded on. So there's the two screws that come out of it. So we put those aside, we don't need those. We'll put the deck away for the minute, we'll look at the base. The base, obviously you know that the AFC is now different from the V1. So that's now got a different feature on the AFC ring. So rather than the half moons, it's now got an oval shape cutout. Other than that, it's mostly the same. I mean, I've changed some of the dimensions to make it match the new base, but other than that, it's pretty much the same thing. So we don't need those two pots for now, so we'll put those out of the way. And this is the business bit. Okay, so in here you can see now that if you have got a V1, it's completely different. I've encapsulated the entire positive part of the circuit, so there's no chance of any shorts or any issues in that regard, and no fitment issues at all ever. So in order to get this out, I don't try to make it difficult for you guys. So the best way to get this out would be to pop it out by just pushing it. So one side you can see there's an O-ring around the positive post here, and you can just see that in the bottom of the deck, and that's what's insulating it. So we need to just push that out. So we just get hold of it and just push, and out it comes. We'll put that aside for a minute, the deck, and we'll look at this part here. This is basically the positive circuit, and I've got a terrible washout on my screen. I can't do much about that. Right, this part is broken up into several components. So you've got the positive post at the top, and then at the bottom you've got the 510 pin, and that's the adjustable part that goes into your mod. So we can take that out. So you just get a flat bladed screwdriver on there, unscrew that. Now that's all fixed in with an O-ring seal, so you'll see that O-ring popping out as it's coming through to the surface. And that'll be undo it by hand now. So that's basically the regular pin. So it's just a threaded piece of rod really, with a seal around it, nothing more than that. So we'll put that aside for now. And then you've got an insulator on here, which just pops off, so we just pop that off like that. All these plastic parts, the two plastic parts, so you've got the splitter, which is this piece, and the insulator, which is this part in this hand. They're both made out of PEEK, so they're high temperature resistance, a lot better resistance than you'll get out of Delrin. Also the O-rings that are on the top here, because obviously the positive is going to draw a bit of heat, and it's isolated from the rest, so it's not part of the main negative, which will just absorb heat through the negative because it's a big chunk of metal. The positive will sort of retain a bit more heat. So in order to sort of circumvent that a little, we put high temperature O-rings on the positive post here that passes up through the deck. So right now what we've got is this little assembly here. Now in order to get this apart, we have to undo, don't know if you can see there's a little screw in there, so you need to undo that little screw, and that's all very, pretty straightforward stuff. Undo the screw, right, so take that part out. Incidentally, did you see that fly across the table then? That was a little O-ring there. Don't lose that little puppy. You have a spare one in the spares kit, but that there is a very important seal. I'll put that aside and I'll explain that to you later. Right, now everything basically just falls out now, so this is basically the dog leg part here, and that is just what moves the power from the center of the ATI off to one side, so if you've got the equidistant spaced posts, rather than most of these other people that go for the easy option and go for a middle post ripper. Anyone can do a bloody middle post ripper. Anyway, screw that holds it on, just the bought-in part. Well, if you need to know the details of some of these parts, if you do need additional spares, we've got no problems with telling you the size of the O-rings and the size of the screws that you need if you want to buy spares, if you want to buy a bunch of them, so just send us a message or something and we're quite happy to give you that information. It's not like we're sort of keeping it all a secret. They're just O-rings or they're just screws. It makes no difference to us. Right, so this part here is a pretty complex part made out of PEEK, and it does a couple of things. The first thing, obviously, it behaves as an isolator. It insulates the positive circuit from the negative circuit. Secondarily, it also behaves as an air splitter. So when it's put into the base, it divides up the air for the two channels, and see the two V shapes in there. That allows it to do that. So you'll have one channel up that side and the other channel up the other side. That's it, really. That's pretty much what that does. Right, so we'll move that aside because that's the positive circuit dealt with. Now it gets a bit easier here to take apart and understand. This is just the negative post. A lot of ATI makers like to press theirs in. I prefer the option of being able to give you guys the option to be able to take it all apart for yourselves. So we've held ours in with a screw there. You can just see the screw on the bottom. So we'll take that out, do the same thing. We'll just undo that, and that just unthreads. There we go. So you've got a negative post and the screw that comes out with it. So now basically all you've got left is a raw deck, really. There's nothing much left there now. What you do have is an O-ring here, and that's intended to give the airflow ring some resistance. On the Rose and on the Snappy V1, the airflow resistance was not done this way. It was not end effect. It was through the circumferentially around the diameter of the base. So this is done slightly differently, just because we needed more room to be able to fit all this extra gubbins inside here. Right, so now we're all apart. There's a number of ways you can configure this. So if you want to, I mean, these posts, you know that the posts have they can be configured to be with the slots pointing outbound or the slots pointing inwards. It's entirely up to you of your preference, and at this stage you can actually you can do that yourself. I'm going to show you how to do that now. When I took it apart, the posts were pointing outwards, well, the slots on the posts were pointing outwards, and when I put it back together, and I'll show you how it's done, you put it back together with the post pointing inwards. Now it's very simple. We start with the negative because this is the easiest bit to grasp, and you'll get this really easy. Inside the deck there, I don't know if you can pick it out, but right next to the hole here, hang on, let me just point to it. Let me get something to, a pointy stick. There we go, a pointy stick. Right, so that's the hole that the negative post goes through, well, the screw for the negative post. And either side of it, can you see the two? There's two blind holes, one either side there and one there. And what that's for is to key the bottom of the negative post. Now I don't know if you can pick this out, but the negative post has got two little spigots on it. Oh, there's an O-ring seal in there as well. Don't use that, you need that. So there's two little spigots on there, and really it's quite as simple as just making those spigots fit into the blind holes on the deck. So what we're going to do, we're going to reassemble it. So, and this is a whole lot easier when I haven't got a camera to worry about. So I hope you realise what I'm going through here. It's just painful. Right, so negative. First of all, we don't really need the screwdriver. You can just line it up and start to wind it on. It's going to be a bit out of focus here because my focus is set at a different position. It's set quite low. So all you do is you just rotate it around until it clicks in place. Hold it in place with a finger. Upturn it, and then turn your screws. Just making sure that's in. Just confirm that. Yep, that's in. Right, so it's in loose. Just give it a bit of a nip. And now you've got your negative post. So I can get a good shot for you. There we go. So now your negative post has the slot facing inwards. Now we're going to do the same with the positive. And I'll show you how you do that now. So that basically, when you're doing this, you have to consider it as two separate sub-assemblies. So this is one sub-assembly, and the positive side is another sub-assembly. And when you put the positive back together, there's just a final little bit of jiggery-pokery, and the base goes on, and it's built. It's really quite straightforward as long as you break it down into its sort of component parts and understand what it is that you're making. Right, so let's go back to the positive post here. We're going to start with the positive post. Excuse me. If you ever choke on your own saliva, happens to me all the time. Excuse me. Right, let's bring these parts in that we're going to need to build this back up. So these are the parts that we initially need, and then there we go, there's the final piece of the puzzle as well. So what we do, first of all, is you take your dog leg part here, the dog leg, and you put that in the center. Now this can go in one way or the other. Now this is the correct way to put it in. It goes in there with the screw hole, well, the threaded hole in the center. Okay, you can see that it's got a sort of a post kind of arrangement. That's the 510 pin basically. So we put that in the middle there like that. Okay, and then we put the screw that comes with it straight into the other side. Now this has got the same sort of arrangement. It's got a keyway on the back of the dog leg. In fact, I'll show you that. Let's do that first because it doesn't. You can't see that very well like that. Right, let's get the screw out. And I don't know if you can see the dog leg itself has two little spigots on the side of the hole there, and that keys in with the slot that runs through the bottom of the post. You can see that. There we go. So I mean, just if you can just build it without the splitter, you can see that that just pops in there like that, and it gives it locks it basically, keys it so as it can't rotate when you're doing it up, which means that you've got two positions, inbound or outbound, and it will only be in one of those two positions, and that's why it's been done that way, just because you won't need it any other way. Okay, so let's build this back up again. Screw into the hole there. Right, so hold the screw in place, take the post, start to screw the post, missed it, start to screw the post on. Where are you going? Right, okay. And you'll feel it catch actually as it's doing up. It'll only go so far, and you'll start to hit the keyway. So once you hit the keyway, then you just sort of gently screw the whole thing together, and it will pull on. I've only done it loosely, but now you can see, because that's the centre there, and we know that the slot in the post there is also facing inbound. Okay. Now I'm building this upside down because it's the right way up for me, but you'll have to deal with it. There we go. Okay. So once that's in, you've got to give it a bit of a nip. You've got to make sure it's in there, but don't do it. You don't have to go too mad on it. Just not even an eighth of a turn, just enough to make it tight, really. Right, now that is now kind of locked in there. That see the splitter there is like bouncing around. It can't go either way. You've got O-rings one side and you've got the dog leg the other. So we're using that to our advantage to make the rest of the assembly easier to put together. So what we need to do next is we put on the little insulator that goes on the end. So pop that on there like that. Now that's it really. That's really, now basically what you've got is the 510 is completely isolated. The 510 positive side of the circuit is completely isolated from the negative when you plug that in. So we're going to put come back here, we're going to put the pin back in. This is the regular pin, not the BF pin, so it's just regular drip. And you'll be able to screw that in by hand up to a point, and then it'll hit the O-ring, and then you've just got to screw it in a couple of turns. And then that's it. Okay? Alright, so that's more or less the positive post assembled. Now, here's the bit. To be able to build that back into the deck, because now we've moved away, that's the other sub-assembly, essentially. So there's your negative sub-assembly and your positive sub-assembly. So to build this back up again, we're going to need a little bit of assistance here. So what we use is, if we get hold of the base and upturn it like I've done, okay? And then if you pop, now this sounds a little counterintuitive, but bear with me, okay? So if you pop the post into it like that, all right? And then you get this little inky-dinky little O-ring, right? And that goes into the middle here. If you can see that, let's see if I can get a decent view here for you. That goes into the middle there. That's your squonk seal, okay? You need that, all right? You need that even if you're not squonking, okay? Because if you're not squonking, it'll leak. Because it'll ooze out the sides. It'll take a long while to leak, but it will leak eventually. But if you're squonking, you definitely need it, okay? Because that's your seal to prevent it from getting to the outside world. Okay, so you pop that in there, and then while it's still, you've got to use gravity to your benefit here, okay? So you basically just take your deck here. Now, obviously the positive post goes into the damn big hole in your deck. All right, so it goes in from the underside. Now you see this pip on the splitter. Okay, well this pip on the splitter is a location point. It plugs into the screw hole of the negative. All it is there for is to prevent it from rotating. It's just to hold it all concentric. Okay, so once it's in, you'll know it's in because it'll all be square and it won't rotate. All right, so I'm going to get this all in. I'm going to try and do this a little bit out of kilter. I mean, try to do this as vertically as you can. But you just put the post into the deck and you gently ease it in, okay? And you use the base to push it, okay? And it's popped through one and it's popped in the other, okay? And you know when you've got it right. When you've got it right, everything will sit flush. There's no gap under here between the splitter and the deck. And additionally, when you look inside I've slipped, haven't I? I've moved out of the way. Right, when you look down into the deck, you can see the O-ring, the post is nice and central. So that positive post is nice and concentric in the hole. Okay. If you haven't got a concentric post, as in it's dead in the middle and it's not off to one side, and if you've got a gap under here where my nail is now, then something slipped. The O-ring in the squonk seal has probably slipped out and you need to pop it off again, and then push it back in again and have another go. Okay, it's pretty easy to do. Hell, I've done enough of them. It's pretty straightforward to do once you've done it. You realise why everything is the way it is. So okay, so that's basically the majority of it done. That's now you're basically just building up the final bit of it. So the reason, like I said, didn't actually mention this. The reason I use this to put the post in is because you don't push when you're putting the post in. You don't push on the splitter. You need to be able to push on this little insulator that's in the middle. Okay, so in order to get a good purchase on that, let's see how that it actually lands right on that that insulator, and you're pushing on that insulator to be able to push everything in. Okay, so that's why I did that, and it just makes it easier. We were doing this ourselves during the assembly, so it's very practical, works very well, and it's kind of like a tool in itself. So okay, right, let's build up the remaining parts. Whoopsie. Right, AFC onto there, onto the base, simple as that. And then, let's point this out. You've got the two holes here. Now, that kind of makes sense to most people, but it will line up with the two holes that you've got in the bottom of the base. So you just lay that on top, and you can see they line up. And then it's just a matter of reaching across myself, grabbing my screws, popping my screws in, and it's back to your Allen key. Now you have to do this graduated, okay? You pop it in bit by bit, because otherwise you're sort of going to pull it off center and it'll just bite up, okay? It's all pretty well precision machined, so you've got to go in bit by bit, just like if you're torquing down an engine head or something. You've got to do it each screw at a time up to a point, and then eventually it'll all pop on, and then you can just go around and just nip the two screws up. Hang on, am I on? There we go. Right, so that's it. That's basically it. What I will do for you is I will show you the squonk pin, and we'll fit that, and I'll show you the difference between the two. So we unscrew that. This is basically how you change it, okay? So very simply. So if you want to change from a regular drip mode onto squonk mode, simply undo the screw at the bottom. No disassembly required other than this. Then you take your squonk pin, which I've put out of the way intentionally so I don't lose it on the floor. And now your squonk pin doesn't have a seal on it. Okay? It's just, well, it just looks like a grub screw, except it's got a little hole up the middle which I can't really. Oh, actually, I think that does come out. Yeah, just about. Okay, so, and that's done. It's not got a slot through it, because if you put a slot through a squonk pin, you know, people don't like that a lot because it tends to leak. So we've done it with a Allen key. So you'll still use the same Allen key. We've done this all intentionally so that, you know, it keeps the amount of tools that you need down to a minimum. So 1.5 Allen key, and you just pop that in up to the level. It's also adjustable. So, you know, if you've got to try and meet up with a squonk pin on your mod that doesn't particularly play ball, you've got some adjustment in the ATI to be able to take up the difference. Okay, so now, I didn't point this out, we now have the posts with the slots facing inwards, which is completely 180 degrees to how they ship. So, and that's it really. So basically just pop the top cap back on. Standard old drip tip, nothing special there. I mean, it's PTFE, so unfortunately no Teflon. It's an inside joke, don't worry about that one. And that's it, okay? So there's your disassembly and reassembly video. That's it. Thanks very much for watching.